I got involved in drinking and drugs when I was 13 years old, and that progressed to the point where by 19 I was involved in a drug and alcohol treatment program, 30-day inpatient program. And for whatever reason, I just decided that that was it, and I was done.
This is What Holds, conversations with founders and leaders about the weight people carry and what becomes possible when they are no longer alone in it. I'm Carla Royal, your host. My guest today is Daryl Dittmer. Daryl is an entrepreneur, coach, author, and the host of the Show Up podcast. I read Daryl's first book, When I Stopped Fighting, a couple of months ago, and I highly recommend it. And that read was one of the reasons that I wanted Daryl on my show, because Daryl tells it like it is. And that's one of the things that I want to hear from people who are successful out there and how they're doing that. And so I appreciate you being here, Daryl. I just want to say that you are so incredibly generous because um, Daryl and I had a conversation last week, our first conversation for this episode, and I forgot to hit record. And and he has agreed to come back, and I'm so grateful. And one of the things I love about that, Daryl, that I forgot to hit record is that's so often how it goes when we are starting something new, and it's okay. And I so appreciate the fact that you also let it be okay. So thank you and welcome for being here again.
Thank you, Carla. You're too kind. I appreciate all the things, all the wonderful things that you said. But we had a great conversation, and it was time well spent. Whether it was recorded or not, it's recorded in here, right?
Yes, yes.
And so yeah, it was wonderful.
It really was. Well, Daryl, tell us a little bit about what you've built over the years and where your attention is now.
Sure. I'll start with a little backdrop, and I'll try to keep it brief. But grew up in the Midwest. My dad was a mechanic. My mom took care of us kids, and it was kind of a typical Midwestern, I guess, if there is such a thing, household. Back then, my dad worked for General Motors, and most kids' dads, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler. That was just kind of how it went in that part of the country, and especially in Detroit. And so, that was kind of the backdrop. I feel like I had a fairly normal childhood, although I know there's some stuff that, was certainly questionable, as far as growing up goes and whatever that means. And, and I got involved in drinking and drugs when I was 13 years old, and that progressed to the point where by 19 I was involved in a drug and alcohol treatment program, 30-day inpatient program. And for whatever reason, and I look at it as there doesn't always need to be a reason, right? And that was, I just decided that that was it. And I was done. And I don't know that I necessarily knew that then, but something inside of me just knew. And that was that. So after that, I decided I wanted to pursue this thing called life. And I did. And it's the same thing as starting the podcast, Carla, right? I mean, some things just don't always go the way we think they're going to go. Actually, I would say that most of the time they don't go anywhere near what we think is going to happen.
Mhm.
And that's honestly, I'll just tell this quick little story, but um there was a time in my life when I was just starting to get sober, and this ties in with my sort of origin story, but when things would just go wrong and wrong, in my mind, wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong, and that's how it felt. And I got to a point where I was like, what is going to happen next? I can't do it.
Yeah.
And for a long time now, life has been more along the line, certainly of, wow, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
Mhm.
And so it's a perception thing, and it's an experience thing, and it's how life we're taught how life goes as it goes, and we either get on board and show up for it, or maybe we sit closer to the sidelines and don't necessarily engage, which is I decided to engage. So I'll leave it there for the moment, Carla.
Yeah, thank you for that background, and I'm curious what you're engaged in now. What's going on now that you're working on, that you're involved in?
A lot.
You said last time that you were very, very busy.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on, and it's great, and I love it, and it's developing and it's creating, and I'm getting involved in things that I have not heretofore been involved in. And from writing my books a couple of years ago and getting that going to just whatever that leads to next, which for me it's been coaching, and I'm starting to get more into sales training to help people show up in a better way, not to sell, but to improve themselves and strengthen that intestinal fortitude so that they can go through the difficult times and smile and look the bully in the face and say, you know what, you're not as tough as you think you are, and that sort of thing. Just engage with business, I guess, in a different way. So that's taking a lot of my time. I'm actually, um once something starts kicking around in here, I kind of have to do it. So you know the story. So my next book, I've got one about 85% outline, but it's probably not going to be the next book that I write. So I'm going to start outlining a different book that's kicking around in here. And so that's happening simultaneously. It's cool because I don't know how to do it, and that is just in terms of all this new stuff, and that is so much of the fun.
Yeah, because you've been really successful in your career, in your life, and it sounds like you're not afraid to try new things and stumble along until you find your sea legs, as they say. And now you're in something new at this time in your life, which is cool.
I love it. And sometimes I am afraid. And that's completely okay. I don't necessarily like it or enjoy it, but I know that facing it as opposed to trying to go around it is the only way for me to get past it into the next thing that I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that fear lands in you and how you know you're afraid and what's happening in your body and your mind and your heart around you. What's happening and how do you know you're afraid and what do you do with that fear?
I'll start with many years ago, and I've been thinking about this as I've helped salespeople over the years, and as I'm sort of solidifying that program. And I would literally have like, because I grew up very blue collar. I didn't grow up being a public facing human being. It was just farm work, carpentry work, that sort of thing. And I ended up actually going to college, but then I started doing carpentry out of college, and somebody asked me to be involved in sales, and I said yes, against I don't want to say against my better judgment, because it's been a great ride, but I used to have little like panic attacks and times where I seriously felt like I was going to pass out, and my breathing would just tighten, my chest would tighten, everything would tighten up, and it flipped me out. And thank God I don't have those anymore, but I had to go do the meetings anyway, regardless of how scared I was. And so I'm not a spotlight guy. Like I don't, and I know I have a podcast and all that crazy stuff, but I'm really not. And I do know from experience that when I feel that fear and that trepidation, and it'll start, it'll come into my chest, and that's kind of where it would land for me, which is where most things land for me. Um, Chest or the, solar plexus, but fear in the chest for sure. And it's okay to have that. And what I have found over the years is that if I try to go around it, it just brings me right back to the same place.
Mm.
And I go to try to go around it, and it just brings me back to the same place. So I don't get past it, and I don't go to the next thing. And so I've learned over the years that the sooner I face what I fear, as long as it's not some crazy thing that I'm, being dared to do and I'm scared to death to do it like I used to do in my younger years. But if it's something I know I need to do, right? Face it, walk into it, and it's amazing. And sometimes I call that the bully. The bully doesn't want you to face the bully. But once you face the bully shrinks. And
Mhm.
and it's amazing because it happens every single time.
What what are you carrying or what have you carried? What are you carrying now that you think people don't see, that they don't know about, given what you're doing and what you're creating and what you have built?
Could you say that again, please, Carla? I'm not sure
Ye
I understood.
Yeah, what weight do you carry that no one really sees? It's like,
Mm.
does that make sense to you? What
Oh,
happened?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, that makes that makes
Yeah.
great sense. Um, you know, it's interesting because my family dynamic, was and where I come from, I was the middle child, whatever that means, and, I think I was the maniac, but and I was, but I had an older brother. I have an older brother, and it's interesting that I say had an older brother because he is my older brother chronologically, but I'm the older brother in the family. And obviously I'm the older brother to my sister as well, which is what I actually am.
Mhm,
And when my mom was dying in 2001, uh, my dad wasn't, he just wasn't in a place where he could be dad. And so I sort of became dad in the family. And so the only reason I say use that kind of a backdrop is just from an understanding perspective that there's always been a lot of family weight on me.
mhm,
And quite honestly, almost everything I've undertaken, people look to me to lead. And that has been, and to me, it's a blessing, but it can also be weighty,
mhm,
because people are looking for answers, people are looking for direction, people are looking for help. And for whatever reason, I look like the dude that's gonna that's gonna provide that for them. And and I love to help. I really love to help. But there also is a part of that helping where I have to be true to myself, and I can't always help all the time
mhm.
because I have to continue to feed me, and I can't just let that sort of disperse and give it away. So that's the weight.
Yeah, and what does that cost you? And I'm curious too, is that something you feel like you kind of put on yourself or that your family put on you? How did it come to pass that you got that role?
I believe I got that role originally because, my I don't think my parents understood my brother and my sister. I really don't. I was into sort of normal kid stuff, sports, and my dad was very into sports, so he and I really connected over that. My older brother wasn't into sports, and my younger sister wasn't into sports, and that seemed to be, in the Midwest at that time, baseball and football and all that kind of stuff that was just kind of the kid thing to do. And we would go, and I grew up in suburbia and then we moved out to the country. But in my younger years in suburbia, it was you'd go out and play sports with friends, and that would be what you did. So I think my parents looked to me to sort of provide that. I don't know whether it was entertainment or accomplishment or, passing the time in something that they understand sort of
Mhm.
thing. But I think that's where it started, and all eyes just sort of became on me at that point, and my value was whether or not I scored 20 points or hit a home run or got good grades, all that sort of stuff.
And is that what drove you in your success as well, do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think that was a good foundation of understanding for me, and I think that drove me. And I also think something else that drove me was I really felt guilty for as how much I let my parents down
Mm.
with the drinking and the drugs and all that sort of stuff. And I really and it ties into the old stuff, but I really wanted them to be proud of me. And I really felt like I had something to make up for, in my early years of sobriety and recovery and that sort of thing. And so that drove me as well. And honestly, the last thing that drove me was I wanted to experience what it might be like to make some money and, have a different life than what I grew up having. So there were a few different drivers.
And was there a time when that drive, that particular drive of your role stopped working as well for you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And because I would beat the crap out of myself. And and not as much figuratively. I mean, that was definitely in there, but literally, like I would just go and go and go and go and no matter what it was, I beat the heck out of my body and there was a time in not too early on, probably midway through my sales career when I got sick, with an intestinal disorder and it
Mm.
wasn't pretty and it wasn't good and I was pretty sick and I had to, I had to reel myself back in and I had to understand that there are times when I just can't do it and don't need to do it and can say no and nobody to impress, all that sort of thing. And that's a long sort of process that takes time to unravel a lot of the old stuff, and I'm sure there's still some of the old stuff there, but I take really good care of myself now, and I don't have the issues, that I had, and even that intestinal disorder, which is supposed to sort of stay with you for the rest of your life, has been asymptomatic for a long time.
What helped you stop using those past strategies and that role to get to where you are now, where you're not doing that anymore, but you're still moving forward, you're still successful? How did you do that?
There's so much to be said, and I can only speak for me, but I've seen with other folks too that finding ways to quiet our mind, very consciously, very intentionally through meditation, breath work, whatever that is, whatever works, walks in nature, it doesn't really matter as long as our intention is there. Um, Quieting my heart is incredibly important and the breath work works for that as well and and honestly practicing gratitude. I've been practicing gratitude daily for a long time and it's not even that I need to practice it anymore consciously because it's just become this wonderful thread that runs through everything in my life, but um and honestly, exercise and eating properly, all of those things contribute to me knowing that I care very much about me
Mhm.
and doing those things on a daily basis um are evidence of that, and I also reap the rewards.
And was there a time where you or have you always, I don't know. I do know a little bit because we talked last week about this, but has there been a point where you let someone in and didn't feel like you were having to do it all by yourself? Did that happen in your recovery work, or did it happen later, or has it happened?
It has happened, and it's happened on different occasions, in different aspects of my life. I would say the first person that I let in was probably my sponsor in the 12 steps. And because some of that work gets uh very personal, very emotional, and some of the taking out the garbage stuff and admitting, sort of admitting me, who am I? And so that's probably the first person, and then there were times when the door would eke open with, with a relationship or something, and then it just had to shut because it wasn't working out. And probably certainly the person that I've let into my life, you know, as unchained as I possibly can to this point in my life is my wife, Christina. And we've been married now for 21 years, and as of the 21st of May, actually. And that might have been the first time we spoke.
It may have been.
But anyway, yeah, there was that is a and that was not an easy transition for me because I was 39 when we got married, and I had not been married previously, and so, to me, that's pretty solid evidence that I wasn't great at allowing people in, or, like we mentioned last time, and Christina and I were out to dinner, and she looked over the table at me, and it wasn't. I guess it was kind of a date, but and she said, "Well, why aren't you married?" And I said, "Because I haven't met my wife yet." And I believe that's absolutely
Mhm.
100% the case. Could I have been? Probably, but I had not met my wife yet.
And what was it about your sponsor, about some of the people maybe that you cracked the door for, and then Christina that enabled you, or what was going on for you that you enabled yourself to go there, to let them come in and walk with you a bit?
I believe that with all aspects of how we behave with ourselves, there's a there's an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And um I believe that's how it happened with my sponsor and I, with Bud and I, because what I looked for in a sponsor was, and I remember this as clear as day, and this was 40 years ago, but I would look in his eyes across one of the, 12-step tables before I really knew him or spoke with him, and I could see how much he cared. And I could see how willing he was to help and give of himself and be of service to other people. And there was this peace that he had, and I could just feel it and I could see it. And that's what I wanted for my life, because I had none of it. I had absolutely none of it. It was just tumultuous and not good in here. And honestly, I would say the same thing with Christina. I There was a part of her, and it wasn't a part of her. It was her. Um, I could just tell how full of love she is, and she's a very loving person. And for whatever reason, she was able to sort of allow that to come out of her, and I was, at the same time able to see it. and able to um align with that in me. And it's been a beautiful thing in terms of me knowing that I'm okay giving my heart to that person, to Christina. And that can be a rare thing.
I agree, and I'm so grateful that you found her and that you found your sponsor. I'm curious what that made possible for you, these relationships that where you did let someone in. What did that make possible for you, or what has that made possible for you?
Well, in terms of my sponsor, the greatest thing that he gave me, I think, and this is my answer for today. It might be different a week from now because always morphing, right? And that's
Yes.
and always understanding differently over time. But he gave me an ability to expand my entire universe, because I trusted what he was experiencing, or what I perceived he was experiencing in his universe. And he wasn't confined by a particular, say, religious belief, or a particular, I didn't even know what the word politics meant back then. I wish I still didn't know, but but he wasn't confined by a belief system. And I, there are things that I believe, but but I wouldn't say I have a belief system. I have what I deem to be true at any given moment. And and Christine, I would say, and how it's sort of falling into my being right now is she allowed me to, and I hope this makes sense, to be able to just sort of let go of that tension of holding myself hostage, and sort of lay back in the grass and say, it's okay,
Mm, mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it sounds like your sponsor for sure really widened your perspective and showed you that there was so much more than your tunnel vision that you had grown up with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that box of stuff that we're handed when we're young, right? Like, here's all the
Mhm.
things you're allowed to believe. And if you don't, and this is what happened to me, if you don't, there could be some pretty dire consequences, including, fire and brimstone for eternity.
Right.
That doesn't sound that fun,
No,
right?
no, it does not.
So it allowed me, and it was a difficult transition for me to start to believe that I wasn't constrained by um, that former belief system, or those former systems of belief, however you'd like to phrase it, and that I could look into other things, and I could read about Taoism or Buddhism, or I could meditate, or I could do breath work. All these things that I could see them in my youth saying, "Oh, be careful, some of this stuff is really scary," and it's really not. It expands my universe, and that's all I really want. I look at the Big Bang as each one of us, can experience that, and just allow ourselves to keep expanding.
That opening. And with Christina, it sounds like and this is the word that you used when we spoke last week was comfort. You felt a sense of comfort with her that you hadn't felt before. And I'm wondering how that was for you. Like how do you experience comfort? What does that mean to you? Where do you feel it in your body? How does that manifest in you?
I feel it right here as you say it, there's a little bit of just emotion that comes up when I feel that, because I'm so grateful for it, and I'm so grateful that um she and I are able to provide that, I believe, for each other. And the comfort is that eh, I can be me. I can be Daryl. I can be whatever I am at any given moment. And over, 21 years, I'm sure I've been many different Daryls over that time. And whatever Daryl is going to show up, you know, for the rest of my existence with Christina, that's completely cool. And that is an absolute comfort to know that it is okay to be me.
Yes, and you were touching your chest with your hand when you said, "I feel it here." And what did you feel here? You said you started to feel it rising as I mentioned it. What were you feeling right there?
It was fullness and it was gratitude.
Okay, wonderful, and I can see it on your face as well, Daryl, so you're a lucky man, and I'm sure she's lucky as well. Um, yeah, it's very interesting because in our last conversation, you did that a lot. You were touching your chest a lot when you were feeling touched or grateful or moved. You touched your chest a lot, and I mentioned it last time because I wasn't sure that you were even aware that you were doing it. And what I loved about it, and what I love about it this time, is that it is a way of you connecting beyond just your mind. In this culture, we make our mind supreme. You know that we're in this culture pretty much cut off from the rest of our being, and there's so much more intelligence below our neck. And our minds are wonderful for so many things, and for business things, and all kinds of things, but it's not super intelligent about having a real life, about inhabiting a life and living a life well. And so I love it when I see you do that, when I see you touch your chest and when I see you feel into that and that you are listening to something deeper than your brilliant mind. Do you find that your body guides you, or do you think about it in that way?
No, for sure. It absolutely does. Yeah, my what I used to have to sort of take time to understand what's resonating for me at any given time, and it's been a progression and an evolution over the years, but I would sort of wait until it was kind of like a roulette ball going around and around and around. All of a sudden, it drops in whatever, the hole, and it's like, oh, okay, now I know. And when it's rolling around, that's my mind, when it's spinning, and then when it finally drops, that's here in my body, and those things happen pretty quickly now. If something is presented to me, generally I either it either resonates or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, um, then it doesn't, and I don't have to go in that direction. So I truly believe that is what guides me through my life now, and I love it because I know it's true. There's no argument. There's no, what's going on. There's no the mind flipping back and forth. It's just either it settles or it doesn't.
Has that changed how you do business?
It has. It absolutely has, and I think it helped me decide to leave a business that I was, a shareholder in, and it just stopped resonating for me. It stopped feeling like the right thing. And so I left that business, and it was a very lucrative business, and but it was time, and it was not an easy. It wasn't one of those where it hit and I listened to it, because I've got all the tug of other shareholders, and I've got, you know, all the people that are working with me, my clients, the people internally. So there was definitely a bit of a tug of war, but once I left, and once I made that decision and said, you know what, I got to go, come what may. I didn't know what was next, and I left, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
How did you do it with all that was tugging at you and all that this culture says about success and the shareholders? How did you do it? How were you able to get over that hump?
I had to be true to myself. And I think those can be the very difficult decisions because the amount of things we have tugging at us these days, that that are probably all along a similar track, taking our attention, taking our focus, they're all along similar lines. And to do something different than that mainstream that's always tugging at us, we risk rejection. We risk, having difficulty with people that we know. Um, we can be chastised for it, all that kind of thing. But I always have to go back to something I learned early on in recovery, which is to thine own self be true. And a big part of to thine own self be true, and included in it, is not just being right by me, but if I stay in a situation that I am not good for and is no longer good for me, I'm doing wrong by everybody involved, not just myself.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful, and I appreciate how you were able to come there and get yourself there. It's really interesting, Daryl, because I don't think it's necessarily the conventional way of doing things. But it sounds like you're not that conventional.
I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. Daryl, is there a part of your story at this age? Is there a part of your story that you used to kind of write off as a detour or something that you didn't really understand about yourself that now you recognize as it really did matter?
Yeah, I think for me, I guess laying a little bit of a backdrop, I was raised to try to be tough. I was raised to I can be stubborn. There's a lot of things that I was sort of raised to be, or I watched my parents be, which I didn't I didn't want to be anything other than that. Um, because
Than
I
what they
thought it was
modeled?
what's that?
Than what they modeled for you?
Than what they modeled
Mhm,
for a while,
mhm.
because I felt like my dad, he was a tough dude, and I had to be tough. I had to emulate that. And my mom she was a tough human being too, and she had a very difficult upbringing, much of which I don't understand, but I know that she did. And so there was this little curled up kid inside of me that was surrounded by this mask of I got to be tough. And come to find out through many years of really understanding the fact that I was just a scared kid inside, and allowing for a person that has some, mental and emotional toughness, and also allowing that scared kid to come out of the corner and come out of hiding. And it's okay if that scared kid shows himself sometimes. And it's okay if I'm tough sometimes, if I'm not being, untrue to me or untrue to other people. Um, I'll be honest with you, Carl. This happened a half an hour ago, or I guess more now. I had a 4 o'clock podcast guest episode. It was a meet and greet, and it was 4:05, and the guy hadn't shown up. And I was like, "All right, 4:05, I'm out, dude." And I may not have done that at some point in my life because I didn't want to feel like I was letting him
Mm,
down, or that
mhm.
I was going to be rejected or whatever. And it's like, but that part of me is no longer running the show. So anyway, I hope that answered the question. I
Yeah, how did you create enough safety? That's my word, I don't know if it's your word, but you said he was scared, so we're scared when we don't feel safe. How did you create enough safety for that little kid, as you call him, to be able to come out, to be able to feel safe enough so that you could go about your life?
I learned how to treat myself better.
Mhm, mhm.
And people and I'll just say this because I'm a big believer in this. People talk about self-love, and self-love is a beautiful thing, but if I'm treating myself poorly, I'm not loving myself. And so I'm not going to feel safe if I'm doing things that harm me.
Mhm, mhm,
And that's allowing, toxins in my life, toxic people, toxic food, toxic whatever it is, toxic hours that I'm keeping, whatever it is. So I had to learn to treat myself better. And then that little kid could kind of peek out and say, "Oh, wow, it's not so bad, in here and out here." Because this dude is really he's providing a place for me to feel comfortable and safe.
yeah. So instead of just completely locking him away or staying away from him, you've kinda allowed him access and to see what kind of a life you've created.
And he's not as scared.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've created quite a lot of safety in your life. And we don't have to feel ultimate safety, we just have to feel safe enough to be able to go about our lives.
Absolutely. And I think there's a an emphasis these days on um, you know, total comfort, total convenience, total safety, total like, wrap me in cotton balls and bubble wrap and all that sort of thing. And it doesn't exist.
Yes.
And most of the things for me that I have found fulfilling in my life as I touch my chest, um, most of the things that I've found fulfilling in my life live on the other side of me taking some risk, whether that's, physical risk, financial risk, emotional risk, whatever it is, even spiritual risk, like when I was younger and saying, you know what? I gotta set this Lutheranism thing aside a little bit and explore other things. And I found out that other things can resonate and other things can fill me in a much more profound way than what I grew up with.
Mhm, and you feel that resonance in your chest, and you trust that, and that
100%.
enables you to take those risks. Daryl, I'm gonna ask you a bit of a vulnerable question, but what is it that you still can't quite shake? Is there anything?
There is, I'm working on it.
Yes.
Um So as I mentioned, I'm not a public facing guy. That's just not my sort of way, I guess. And I'm learning more and more to be, but something that has scared me to death, and I've done some of it, but I haven't done it in the way that I know will carry me through that fear. And not only carry me through the fear, but provide me with fuel, rocket fuel, I believe, in terms of just inside of me. And that's public speaking. And there's this pie, and I call it a half a pie, and there's, three quarters, 80%, whatever it is, of things that I've walked into and things I've been scared of that I've done, and they've worked out in one way or the other. And I've just got that little piece of pie at the end there for me. And who knows, maybe there's going to be a whole additional pie thrown in my lap,
There may be.
which is okay. We'll get to that when it presents itself. But that's the big one for me right now. And this sales training stuff that I'm doing is moving me in that direction. So it's just a matter of what unfolds next and me walking into it.
And of course, my experience of you has been this public face. your podcast, having me on your podcast, these two conversations with you here, and you're just a natural.
Thank you. I
You're an
appreciate it.
absolute natural. Yeah, so I'm really excited for you as you're leaning into this to see what's going to unfold for you. Daryl, what would you say to someone listening who's still trying to carry everything alone?
I would say that there's so much there's so many wonderful people out there who are in a position to help, and Carla, you are absolutely one of those people.
Thank you.
And I felt that from the first few moments that we spoke on my podcast the first time. And and so there are wonderful people, and there's wonderful resource, and there's an absolute universe of assistance and I can't think of a better word than help. And I know what I needed when I was in trouble and I was 19 years old and I needed something to break me past that just felt like concrete that I was stuck in. And it came in the form of my sponsor, but I had to ask. I had to reach out and I had to take on that fear of doing that for whatever period of time that lasted until I did it. And then when I did it, it was probably the most important move I had made to that point in my life, and it has to be a top 5 for my entire life. So I would say if you can if you can commit to yourself, set aside that fear just to do that one little thing, that one little reach out, and ask for some help, an entire universe can open up to you at that point. Just get over that little fear.
If you have another minute, Daryl, I'd love to just follow up and ask what do you think, at least for you, what was the fear of reaching out? What is that about for so many people? What do you find it to be true for you?
It's for me, it's not as much anymore. Back then it was I didn't know what they were gonna say.
Mm,
I didn't have the confidence in any way to be able to handle being rejected.
mhm,
And if somebody was gonna say no to me, it would be devastating because they would be rejecting me,
mhm.
and and that would have been terrible. So, and that has morphed over the course of time, which is another wonderful thing about this growth journey is it changes all the time. And we get better at the living part all the time. So, you know, it has so much to do with just taking that one step that you don't want to take. And that just that one step that you don't want to take for me removed 75% of that all that fear of rejection.
And has it made it easier to ask since then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And eh, I always like to plant seeds of what people can look forward to. And as you go on this journey of growth, and if you really embrace growing inside as the first order of business, and that was a hard one for me to get around because I wanted to be successful in business and I wanted to make money and all that sort of stuff. But I had to also focus on what was going on inside of me. And if we do that, it's amazing how and I've thought about this lately, so many things that used to matter just don't matter anymore. And I don't mean that from a cold-hearted perspective. I just mean you can only give yourself and receive from so many things in your life, and it can't be everything. It's gotta be it's gotta be a select few things where you really, interface with those things and feel that beauty and that fulfillment in all of those wonderful things. And I think we can spread ourselves out a little too far trying to care about everything. And that does not provide the contentment and fulfillment as, bringing the horns in a smaller world of things to care about.
And it sounds like you have in part gotten there by trusting that resonance in your chest.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot has had to go to the sideline in my life
Yeah.
because it just didn't work.
Well, Daryl, I so appreciate your time again. Thank you for being with me. You're a wonderful conversationalist and guest. How can people reach you? Because you have a lot going on that would be interesting, I think, for people.
Thank you, Carla. The best place to find me is my website, which is daryldittmer.com, and DarylDittmer.com. That talks about my story, my books, coaching, sales training, all of those sorts of things, my podcast. So you can social media, all that stuff. It's all right there.
Very good. Well, I will be certain to put that in the show notes. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate you as well. Thanks for having me on.
If you're listening and this conversation brought someone to mind, send it to them. That's how a show like this finds the people it's for. I'm Carla Royal. I work privately with founders and leaders on the things underneath what they are carrying. You can find me at carlaroyal.com. This is What Holds, conversations with founders and leaders about the work that holds what they are building. I'll see you next time.